You're listening to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast, episode number 76. Welcome to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. I'm your host, Paula Price, lawyer turned certified executive coach. This podcast was created to empower women lawyers just like you to create a life and practice you love. Join me every week for a break from the hustle so we can focus on you, what you truly want, and how you can create it. If you're over the overwhelm, done with putting out fires, and ready to redefine success on your own terms, you're in the right place. Ready for today's episode? Let's dive in. Hello, my friend. Welcome back to the podcast. It's Paula here, and I'm so delighted to connect with you this week. Thank you for tuning in. Wherever you are, whenever this happens to be, I hope you are having a fabulous week, and I'm glad you have chosen to prioritize this time to think about what your priorities are and how you might want to spend in the future from the bank of yes. Now, before we dive into today's topic, I just wanted to mention that I will be making an announcement at the end of this episode. So please stay tuned. It's something I'm excited to share with you, and I think you'll be excited to learn about it. So with that, my friends, let's talk priorities. Now, the fact that you are listening to this podcast episode signals to me that you are choosing to make a priority out of your priorities and being more intentional about them. And what I have noticed is that many of you, myself included, struggles to figure out what to choose to say yes to and what to say no to. And what you might find is you have a very full plate and everything seems to cry out to you at an equal volume. Now, sometimes this can lead to feelings of overwhelm. You might feel like your life is coming at you. You may feel like you're constantly in a reactive mode instead of a proactive mode. You might feel like you've gone from going with the flow to literally surfing over a flood. So if you can relate to that, what might be happening is a challenge with your priorities. And let's face it, you have various sources of work, for example, that is coming your way. So if you're at the office, you might have colleagues that want you to help out on their files. You have new clients coming in through the door. You have networking events to go to. You have court appearances to make. You have deals to close. You have emails to respond to. And sometimes you sit down and what it is that you had on your plate to work on that day gets completely pushed to the side for another project that comes in. And so I get it. You have multiple and competing priorities at your workplace. Then if you're like me, you leave your office or your virtual office and you start the second shift. You've got a family to take care of. You've got dinner to put on the table. You've got homework to review. You've got clothes to keep clean. You've got little people to take care of. Maybe you've got a partner, a spouse, your friends. And so it's not as though you stop work and then you have all this downtime to catch up or relax. It's like it keeps on going. You might feel like you're a little bit on a treadmill. And chances are, part of the reason that this is happening is because you want to do all these things. Ultimately, you want to have it all. You want to do it all. And so you've signed up for all of it. We haven't even talked about leisure or travel or distractions. I mean, really, your life, chances are, is pretty full. And the question is, how do you go from that feeling of everything being on an equal playing field to creating a little bit more structure and ease in your life? So what might be happening is that you are saying yes to everything, which ultimately leads to a little bit of chaos. When everything is a priority, nothing is a priority. And that is a concept that is discussed in a lot of detail in Greg McKeown's book called Essentialism. Right? If you imagine that if you're trying to make everything a priority, you don't get as much traction. And a nice way to think about this is a rocket ship trying to leave planet Earth. If you are trying to do that, you need to have sufficient energy and focus in order for liftoff to actually happen. If you're spending your energy in too many places, you never really get the momentum. You never really get the traction. And so if you feel like you're always busy, but you're not really getting anywhere, that might literally be what is happening for you. Now, going back to priorities, the word itself, priorities in the plural, is a little bit of a misnomer. A priority, a pure priority by definition, is the thing that goes first. And the Cambridge Online Dictionary offers a lovely definition for priority, something you do or deal with first because it is more important or urgent than other things. So if you're talking about priorities in the multiple, already there's a little bit of a watering down or dilution of the concept itself, because really a priority is one thing at a time. What that definition also encapsulates is this notion of urgency and importance. And if you've listened to this podcast for a while, you may have heard me talk about Stephen Covey and the Eisenhower matrix before, which is this idea of dividing up your priorities in terms of urgency and importance. And so something that is urgent and important might be your appendix bursting and needing to go to the hospital right away. Something that is urgent and not important might be that phone call that you get from a colleague telling you about the latest cat video that just went up on YouTube. It might feel urgent, but it's probably not very important. And I think the category that we really need to focus on, and it's the category that we're focusing on today, is the not urgent and important category. That's where you spend time planning. That's where you spend time working on your practice as opposed to in your practice. And so as we go through today's episode, I'd invite you to think about what you have on your desk. Is it urgent? Is it important? What combination is it for you? And where does it really belong? Are you doing things right now that are urgent and not important, and instead foregoing the opportunity to do things that are important but maybe not urgent? Now, another thing that happens is that when you say yes to everything, it's almost like you've been given a credit card with an unlimited credit balance. And so you're out there, you're saying yes, and you're having a party, you're buying all the things, but eventually at some point you need to pay. And you need to pay with cash and you need to pay with interest. So when you are out there saying yes to the bake sale, yes to the networking event, yes to the new file, yes to your kids, yes to your partner, yes to your friends, next thing you know, you find yourself with a schedule that is completely overbooked and you are barely keeping up and you are exhausted. And if this happens to you, please don't beat yourself up. This happens to so many of us. And all I'm trying to do today is to raise awareness of this happening and to invite you to start thinking about your yeses as something that is a precious commodity. It is a gift that you are giving out. It is money. It is a currency that you are spending. And so let's start thinking about how to spend that mindfully, whether you think in terms of a budget, whether you think in terms of optimizing your dollars, your time, your investments. However it is helpful for you to think about it, I would invite you to have that analogy in mind. Now, another thing that happens is when you start taking on all these projects, it gets even harder to tell what's important and what is not, because you simply have such a broad mix of activities and engagements and work projects that you're doing that it's hard for you to even take a step back and decide what is important and what isn't. And so when the invitations come in, it's an automatic yes. And what ends up happening is when you say yes to one thing, you're also saying no to another. So what you might find is that you're saying yes to, say, the bake sale, but then you're saying no to time with your kids. And so I would invite you to think about what the trade-offs are that you're inadvertently signing up for because of the easy yes reflex. Now, what ultimately happens when we aren't selective in terms of our priorities is kind of like the life work equivalent of the kitchen junk drawer. So if you're like me, you have a drawer in your kitchen where you kind of throw all of the things that don't really have a home. So we've got a drawer. It's got a screwdriver, a box of Q-tips, a gift card, some paper clips, some hair elastics, you name it, it's probably in there. Now, if you start saying yes to everything, your life can start to look like that junk drawer. And it can make it really hard to distill the items of value, like the gift card, from the items of less value, like the paper clips. And maybe the paper clips are necessary at some point. Maybe you don't want to use your gift card right away. But what I am inviting you to think about is if you were to be intentional about the priorities that you're choosing in your life, how would it look different? Are you currently living the equivalent of the kitchen junk drawer? Or have you got more structure and organization in your life? For some reason, the image that's coming to mind is the California closet, where it's organized, things have a home, you're intentional, you know what you want to do. So what I'm offering today are 3 suggestions in terms of how you can be more intentional about the priorities that you're choosing in your life. Now, the fact that you're here listening to this podcast episode suggests to me that you're already starting that process of being more intentional. And I'm guessing that as you've been listening today, you have had ideas come up for you, examples in your own life of things that you're choosing to make a priority that maybe you will demote. And chances are there are things that you haven't quite upped in the priority game that you are going to start focusing on. So bravo, we're already making progress. Now, there are 3 strategies that I'm offering on top of the progress you're already making. Number 1 is called the big rocks. And this is a concept that was coined by Stephen Covey. He talks about big rocks and gravel. When you are thinking about your priorities, there are certain items that would be a big rock. A big rock is a big lever. It's a project that will allow you to move forward with significant steps. In your world, it might be drafting a letter to opposing counsel that you dread writing, but you know will move the file forward. Gravel might be filing your emails. Gravel, sorry, I forgot to mention, are the little things that could get done. They're the nice twos. They're the, yeah, I should, but it's not extremely urgent kind of tasks. That's the gravel. And ultimately, when you're deciding what to do in your day, in your week, is you want to take the big rocks and put those in the glass first, and then you fill the glass with the gravel. So when it comes to your priorities, you might think of what are the big rocks, and it might help you to think about your priorities in terms of categories. So you may have a category for your personal life. You may have a category for your professional life. You may have a category for your health. What are the big priorities in each of those? And you may even distill it down even further and look at what the big rocks are in respect of those priorities. But the idea here is to really focus. If you were to create a list of all the things that you could do, what are the real levers and what is gravel? And how do you start with the levers and what do you want to do with that gravel? Now, the second suggestion that I have when choosing priorities is a concept called the slow hiker concept. Now, this comes from the book Essentialism, written by Greg McKeown, where he talks about a gentleman who was trying to create efficiencies in his business. And he learned a lesson on a completely unrelated trip he took with a group of Boy Scouts. He was tasked with taking these Boy Scouts from one side of the mountain to the other, beginning in the morning, ending at dusk. And he had to do it with the group that he had. And among the group of Boy Scouts, there were some fast hikers and there were some slow hikers. And what he realized was that the fast hikers were running ahead and the slow ones were eventually catching up. And the pace overall was not going to get them to where they needed to be in time. So what he did was he identified that the problem here was that the slow hikers just were not able to keep up. So what he chose to do was to take those hikers and put them at the beginning of the queue. And he took the contents from those slow hikers' backpacks and he redistributed the weight among the other hikers. And what he ended up with was a train of hikers which moved faster overall than what they were doing before. So I love this story because it really highlights how sometimes what you need to do for your priorities isn't to take priorities and add them in a strategic way. It's actually taking what's already happening and removing an obstacle, removing a roadblock, removing a bottleneck. So think about your practice. Think about your personal life. Think about the way that you're getting the kids out the door in the morning. Think about the way you're processing a file. Think about the way you're booking your time. And where is it that you have a slow hiker that you can actually solve for? And what will the effect be when you deal with that constraint? So that's number 2. Your first suggestion is let's look for the big rocks. The second is let's figure out who the slow hikers are and solve for them. Now, the third is another category which I'm calling the saboteurs. And the saboteurs have shown up in my life, and I'm guessing that you have a few of them in yours as well. And these are actions that you take or things that you do that are actually pushing you away or slowing you down from getting to where you want to be. Now, an example, I have a couple from my own life that I've dealt with. Number 1 is I used to, after the kids went to bed at night, try to sit at my computer and get work done. And I can tell you that in those wee hours when I was exhausted, I would sit down. I would be kind of peckish. So I'd go and get some sugary snack from the cupboard. I'd sit down, I'd type out a few words, I'd go back to the cupboard, get more sugar, etc. You can see how this is going. And it would take me a very long time to produce very little work. So not only was I not producing very quickly, I was also sabotaging my health goals because instead of going to sleep and getting rest and feeling good in the morning, I was eating foods that wouldn't really appeal to me in the light of day, but anything just to make it more tolerable to sit at my computer at 11 o'clock at night. So I removed that saboteur and I shifted my schedule so that my work came early in the morning instead of late at night. You may find that you have an equivalent saboteur, something that you're doing that is actually counterproductive, whether it's time spent on social media or time spent with a colleague who likes to visit and you talk for a few minutes, but then you're not getting your work done and it slows you down. Those are examples of saboteurs. Another that you might be able to relate to is something that sometimes happens in evenings and weekends. So it's when you bring home with you in the evening, knowing that you're actually not going to do it. And so you spend your evening after work thinking about the work, but never actually doing it. And so not only do you not enjoy your evening, but you also don't get your work done. And that can also bleed into your weekends. You may decide, well, I'm going to bring some work home over the weekend and I'm going to set aside a couple of hours, and you keep pushing that back until Sunday night rolls around and you still haven't done that work. So what I'm saying here is, instead of having that habit, what about just getting rid of that habit altogether and finding another way to do it? So when you've got your priorities, what are you currently doing that you can just strike off the list and no longer have in your life? Now, when you do these things, what is going to happen is you are going to start creating better outcomes because you are being more intentional about what you are choosing to put on your plate. You're being more intentional about how you're dealing with your existing workload, and you're letting things go that don't serve you. Being strategic is going to further refine what it is that you choose to do. And you'll find that what you've chosen to do is now much more aligned with your goals and desires. And when you couple that with intentionality, you're really choosing, right? It's going to force you to make decisions. Just like when you're spending your money and you're trying to decide, let's say you've got given yourself $100, or, you can do this exercise now. If you had $100 to spend on any form of entertainment or any type of food or any activity or any item of clothing, you would then do the mental math of how are you going to maximize the impact of that money. When you start looking at your yeses in a more constrained way, you're going to start thinking about how you can stretch those yeses to the max. And what you'll find is you'll create more of what you truly like in your life versus things that you don't like so much. I mean, you probably had that experience of buying something on sale that you thought, well, it's on sale, I should buy it because it's on sale. And then you never use it and it just clutters up your closet or your drawer or the kitchen drawer, whatever happens to be that investment. And so the less you have of that, the more clarity you have, the more focus you have, and the less clutter to slow you down. On that point too, when you've bought something that you don't ever use, you still have to make space for it. You may still have to maintain it or dust it or whatever, and that takes time. So if you can think about things maybe you've committed to, maybe it's that, I don't know, cooking the muffins for the bake sale, just as an example, the equivalent, whatever that is in your life, it's the baking, it's getting the recipe, it's making sure that you arrive on time. All that mental load, you can now get rid of it just by saying no. So the other thing you'll find is that you make progress, right? Going back to that rocket ship analysis or analogy, when you're only focused on a certain select few things, you go so much further faster. And Greg McKeown has a lovely illustration to highlight that point. He has an image and there are two circles. And on one of the circles, it kind of looks like a bicycle wheel with multiple spokes going out in every single direction. And those spokes go a certain distance. But then there's another circle with a single spoke and it goes so much further. And that is effectively what you're doing when you're narrowing down your priorities or picking a priority, is you're going so much further, often faster. So to do this, you'll need a few skills. Number one, you're going to adhere to a yes budget. So that means you're going to have to limit the yeses that you dole out in your personal life, in your work life, among your friends, among your family, to your colleagues, to your clients, and even to yourself sometimes. You're going to have to get really good at managing the discomfort of saying no. Now, that includes the willingness to accept the consequences of your own decisions. So if you say no to a networking event, you're also going to have to experience the FOMO of not being there and the resistance you might feel when you're at home and maybe you're spending time with your family and you know you could be at this event. You're going to have to get used to that. And what I can tell you is that that will get easier over time. As you develop that trust with yourself, as you make decisions and follow through, you will get better at feeling that. You'll realize the FOMO isn't so bad and that the choice that you made is actually the right choice for you. And another skill you may need to develop is the tolerance of not feeling busy all the time. And maybe this happens to you where you find that you've all of a sudden got a gap in your calendar. Maybe a file that was supposed to go to trial settles and you find a big open space on your calendar. Maybe a deal that was going to close gets pushed off or it falls apart. Same thing. You've got this big open space in your calendar. And whereas you may have thought you'd be really excited about it, when it actually happens, you feel kind of unsettled. Like, why don't I have something to rush to? And so you're going to have to get familiar with that feeling and decide what you're going to do with that time, whether it's taking time to relax, whether it's filling that time with something else. Now, what you will create by doing this, by setting your priorities, by being intentional, is again, you're going to create more alignment between what you're actually doing and what you want to be doing in your life. You'll create better results and you'll find that your calendar and your life have more space. You'll feel more ease and you'll have an allowance for grace. And what I mean by that is that you'll have space for new opportunities to come your way. My mom used to say, you should clean out your closet, get rid of all your old clothes, because when you have space there, you leave room for those new items of clothing that you want to introduce into your closet. So you can think of your life the same way. When you create a little bit of space in your calendar, then you get to be selective about what it is you choose to bring in, and you might be surprised at what you find. Now, that's what I have to share with you today in terms of the content about priorities. So I hope this has been a helpful discussion, and I hope that as I've been talking, you've been able to identify priorities that you've been making that you may want to redistribute and how you can apply these practices going forward. And now that you're listening, I really love the idea of you out there in the world applying the big rocks, applying the slowest hiker, and eliminating what is not serving you. Now, in terms of priorities, one thing that I am choosing to make a priority is this very announcement that I'm making to you. And what I am doing in my coaching practice is creating an opportunity for you. January 1st, 2023, I am going to be creating or opening a membership program for women lawyers. It is going to be a program that is devoted to supporting women lawyers in their practice and in their personal lives. To me, those two go hand in hand. And the reason that I want to create this is because I think it is a way to form a relationship with more women lawyers. I think it's a way to support you, not only in the short run, but also in the long run. What I want to do is create a platform, a community, a way to connect and grow together. If you listen to my podcast episode about building a legacy, then you know that I'm interested and passionate about creating something in your work. And this is for you too, something in your work that really is meaningful to you and that creates an impact. And the way I see this playing out is that you as a member of this community will create an even greater impact in your own life. And that impact is going to spill over to those around you. It will spill over to your family. It will spill over to your colleagues. I can think of so many examples of how this works. For your professional work, for example, when you're able to find more joy in your work, when you're able to find more control in your schedule, when you're living more in alignment with your goals, that has an impact on how you relate to your spouse, to your partner, to your friends, to your children. It's also creating impact in a way that inspires others. When you go out and choose to go after your goals and follow your passions and your dreams and creating a real impact through your work, you inspire others, you show them that it is possible, and you give them permission to do the same. So I'm really passionate about this. I have been studying coaching now for several years. I've been coaching lawyers one-to-one. I love being able to have that intimate relationship with one lawyer at a time, and I plan to continue that work for the foreseeable future. And I also know how impactful it can be to be part of a community. I myself am part of other coaching communities. I can tell you I have achieved some goals that felt unreachable to me. One goal was creating this podcast in the first place. Another goal was reaching 10,000 downloads, which I'm very proud and happy to say I've now reached. And that is very much thanks to you, listeners like you who are listening to the podcast, who are sharing the podcast. And your goal may not be to create a podcast, but I'm guessing you have some pretty big goals in your professional life and in your personal life. And what I want to do is create a container for you to achieve those goals. And so, as I mentioned, I've been studying memberships. I've been studying coaching. I've been coaching, and I feel like the time has come for me to open up the opportunity for us to go on this journey together. And I've been thinking about what the curriculum is going to be. I've decided on 12 topics that are going to cover the first 12 months of this program. Right now, it really is a continuity type of lesson. They all build on each other. And I would love, love, love for you to be one of the founding members, to join in at the first level, right? At the very opening of this, what is going to be a beautiful and amazing community. So if this sounds like something that you're interested in, I would love to hear from you, and I would love to put you on a waitlist. And if you want to join the waitlist, I would ask that you go to the joyfulpractice.com website. There are a number of sign-up forms on the website. There's one under membership where you can join the waitlist. All you need to do is type in your name and email address and put membership in the message line. You can also reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can send me an email at my UpLevel Lawyer Coaching Practice.com website. Now, I know I'm giving you a lot of different websites, but you'll find me. You can Google me and find me and just let me know, and I will keep you up to date on all of the developments. I will be sharing more about the membership and what it's going to look like. I'll be offering some training that will help you decide if it's right for you. And ultimately, I just think it's going to be such a beautiful experience and such a wonderful way for all of us to experience 2023. So think about what your goals are. Think about the kind of support that you would be able to benefit from in a community like that. It truly is that opportunity for us to go through our goals together. You might have had that experience where you learn something from a book, or you have gone through coaching yourself, and initially you start out and you're really hyped, you're sticking to it, but then you find that it's hard to keep up the practice. And that's what this membership is all about. It is the joyful practice. It is keeping that front and center. It's coming back to what's important to you. It is having the courage and the support and the tenacity and determination that you need to reach your goals. So my dear, dear friend, please stay tuned for more information on that. Please reach out if that's something that you already know that you want to be part of. And thank you. Thank you again for your continued support. Thank you for listening. And I am so excited to continue this relationship and to reconnect next week. Bye for now. If you enjoyed today's show and don't want to miss an episode, subscribe and follow the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you haven't already, please leave a rating and review. Your feedback will help me create a podcast that's tailored to your needs and goes straight to the heart of what matters to you. For instructions on how to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com/podcast launch. See you next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. If you want more information, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com. See you next week.